If your temperature rises at night, call me. But it's better to come to me. And how can you help me at midnight? Maybe it's better to go to the hospital right away. You should subscribe to this channel, press the bell, and write a comment. After all, it is on this channel that you will find interesting life stories that will touch your heart. Enjoy watching. That night, I heard words that I still can't get out of my head. She leaned close, pressed the thermometer against my skin, and whispered, "If it rises tonight, come. I'll be waiting." My heart stopped. I didn't know if she was teasing, comforting me, or confessing something she kept hidden. But from that moment on, nothing about my quiet, predictable life felt the same. I should probably start from the beginning. My name's Thomas Reed. I'm 38, divorced, and to be honest, I've been living like a ghost these past few years. Work, sleep, repeat. I come home to an empty apartment, heat up leftovers, and stare at the television until I fall asleep on the couch. My ex-wife remarried, and my daughter spends more time with her new stepdad than with me. I don't blame her. He's got the house, the pool, the stability I never managed to give her. That night, I wasn't feeling well. Fever, chills, the kind of heaviness that makes even lifting a glass of water feel like work. I figured I'd ride it out alone like everything else in my life. But then I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, there she was, my neighbor, Sarah Bennett. She's 40, sharp, self-assured, with that natural beauty that doesn't need effort. Shoulder-length dark hair, glasses that frame her bright eyes, jeans, and a plain white top that somehow made her look like she just stepped out of a magazine. "I heard you coughing," she said, holding up a small paper bag. "Figured you could use some medicine." I wanted to tell her I was fine, that I didn't need help, but my body betrayed me. I stepped aside and let her in. She moved through my apartment like she belonged there, setting down the bag, boiling water for tea, telling me to sit. I felt oddly exposed, like she could see through every wall I'd built around myself. Then came the moment I didn't expect. She pulled a thermometer from her purse, walked over, and before I could protest, pressed it gently against my forehead. "You're burning up," she said softly, her voice calm, but with a trace of concern that felt almost intimate. I laughed nervously, trying to make light of it. "Guess I'll survive." She looked at me for a moment, a small smile forming at the corner of her lips, like she was debating whether to say something or not. And then, leaning closer, so close I could feel her breath against my ear, she whispered those words. "If it rises tonight, come, I'll be waiting." I froze. My pulse raced faster than any fever could explain. Was she joking, flirting, testing me? By the time I gathered the courage to look at her, she had already pulled back, her smile unreadable, somewhere between playful and serious. I stood there stunned, clutching the bag of medicine she'd brought. She left soon after, closing the door behind her as if nothing unusual had been said. But I couldn't shake it. Her voice lingered, echoing in my head. "I'll be waiting." That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing in the dim light of my apartment, brushing her hair behind her ear, looking at me with that calm certainty. She was just a neighbor, someone I waved to in the hallway, someone I never imagined stepping into my life in any real way. And yet, here she was, shattering the silence I had gotten so used to. I lay awake wondering, was it an invitation, a challenge, or just a neighborly joke I was reading too much into? But deep down, I knew it wasn't just small talk. Something had shifted, something I couldn't ignore. And as the hours crawled toward midnight, I realized I had a choice to make. Stay in bed like always safe and alone, or step across the hall and find out what she truly meant. I didn't knock right away. I must have stood there in the hallway for 10 full minutes, staring at her door like it might swing open on its own. My fever had eased after the medicine, but my mind was burning hotter than ever. Those words, "If it rises tonight, come, I'll be waiting." They wouldn't let me rest. Every creak of the building, every flicker of the dim hallway light made my heart thump harder. I told myself I was being ridiculous. She was just being kind. Maybe teasing, but at 1 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't fight the pull any longer. I walked over, lifted my hand, and knocked. The door opened almost instantly, like she'd been expecting me. Sarah Bennett stood there barefoot, wearing the same white top from earlier, but with her hair tied back loosely, glasses off. She looked softer, younger somehow, but her eyes held that same steady glow. "You couldn't sleep either?" she asked, her voice low as if the night itself was listening. I shrugged, holding up the excuse I'd prepared in my head. "I thought I should thank you for the medicine." Her smile widened, knowing but not mocking. She stepped aside and gestured me in. The apartment smelled faintly of chamomile and old books. A small lamp cast a warm circle of light across her kitchen table where 2 mugs of tea were already waiting. "You made tea for 2?" I asked, surprised. "I had a feeling," she said simply and sat down. I joined her, awkward at first, cradling the mug in my hands like an anchor. We talked at first about ordinary things, neighbors moving out, the broken elevator, the grocery store prices. But soon the small talk slipped away. She told me she'd been widowed for almost 6 years, that she tried dating once or twice, but it never felt right. She said the nights were hardest when the silence pressed in too close. I found myself telling her more than I planned. About the divorce, about how I still kept a box of my daughter's childhood drawings under my bed, about the way I sometimes sat in the car outside my ex-wife's house just to watch the light in the living room to pretend I was still part of it. Sarah Bennett listened without interrupting, her chin resting lightly on her hand, her eyes locked on me. No judgment, no pity, just presence. And it unnerved me more than if she'd argued or lectured. At one point, she reached across the table, resting her hand on mine. My chest tightened. Her touch was steady, grounding, like she decided I needed it more than she did. "You carry too much alone," she said softly. "No wonder you burn up." For a moment, the room felt too small, too charged. I wanted to pull back to make a joke, but I couldn't. I let her hands stay there, warm against mine. Then a sound broke the moment. A creak in the hallway, footsteps, and the faint slam of a door. We both looked toward the entrance. She sighed, pulled her hand back, and leaned against the chair. "Neighbors," she murmured. "They see everything, even when there's nothing to see." But her eyes told me there was something to see, something we weren't ready to name yet. I left her apartment an hour later, walking back down the hallway with a head full of questions. Had I crossed a line? Was I just a lonely man reading too much into kindness? Or had she meant every word, every touch? As I shut my door, I caught myself smiling for the first time in months. And just before I lay down, I realized I wasn't thinking about the fever anymore. I was thinking about her. The next morning, the whispers had already started. I was heading out for work when old Mrs. Ellis from the second floor gave me that look, the kind that pretends to be polite but lingers too long. "Late night, Thomas Reed?" she asked with a little smirk. I brushed past it, muttering something about not sleeping well, but I knew what she meant. News travels fast in a building like ours, especially when someone sees a man leaving his neighbor's apartment at 2 o'clock in the morning. I told myself it didn't matter that Sarah Bennett and I hadn't done anything wrong. But as the day went on, the weight of those looks pressed harder. At the hardware store where I worked, even my friend Mark, a guy who usually minded his own business, nudged me with a grin. "Heard you've got company these nights." Finally moved on. I didn't answer. By the time I got home, I was already on edge. Sarah Bennett was standing outside her door, talking to someone I didn't recognize. He was tall, well-dressed, maybe a few years older than me, with the kind of confidence you can spot a block away. His hand rested casually against the door frame as he leaned closer to her. She didn't see me at first, but when she did, her smile faltered just a little. "This is Thomas Reed," she said quickly, turning toward me. "My neighbor." The man looked me up and down, his eyes sharp, calculating. Then he extended a hand, but there was nothing friendly about it. "Noah Sullivan," he introduced himself. "Old friend." His grip was firm, too firm, the kind that's meant to remind you who's stronger. I nodded, pulling my hand back. "Nice to meet you," he smirked, then turned to Sarah Bennett. "We should finish that conversation later." Without another word, he walked past me, his cologne lingering like smoke. When he was gone, I asked, "Who was that?" She sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Noah Sullivan, we went to school together. He was close to my husband, too. After he passed, Noah Sullivan started showing up more often. He thinks I owe him something." "Owe him?" Her eyes hardened. "His version of love is control. He likes reminding me I could have a comfortable life if I just said yes to him." I felt heat rise in my chest. "And you?" I told him no 100 times. She said, her voice low. "But men like Noah Sullivan don't hear no. They hear delay." That night we sat in her kitchen again. She seemed tired, drained from the encounter. I poured the tea this time, trying to offer something steady, but the tension hung heavy between us. At one point, she looked up at me, her eyes searching. "Do you think I'm reckless letting you in like this?" After everything, I shook my head. "I think you're brave. Braver than me most days." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, but it didn't last. "If Noah Sullivan sees us together, he'll make it harder. He'll feed the gossip, make you doubt me, doubt yourself. That's what he does." I wanted to tell her nothing could make me doubt what I felt when she looked at me that way. But the truth was, I did doubt myself, not her. Doubt if I was strong enough to handle the storm she carried with her. When I left her apartment later, Noah Sullivan was waiting near the entrance of the building, leaning against his car. He didn't say anything, just watched me walk by with that same smirk, a silent warning. Back in my place, I sat on the couch in the dark, staring at the wall. Part of me wanted to back away to tell myself this wasn't my fight. But then I remembered her hand on mine the night before. The way her voice softened when she let me see her pain. I knew then that stepping away wasn't an option. I was already in it whether I was ready or not. I hadn't planned to knock on her door that evening. After the run-in with Noah Sullivan, I thought maybe some space would be wise. But all through dinner, I couldn't shake the image of her face when she talked about him. The tired smile, the weight she tried to hide. By 9, I found myself pacing the hallway, and before I knew it, I was knocking softly. Sarah Bennett opened almost at once. She looked surprised, then relieved. "I was hoping you'd come," she said. She was in a loose cardigan over her white tank, her hair tucked behind one ear. The sight of her eased something in me. Inside, the apartment was dim, just the lamp on in the living room. She sat down the book she'd been pretending to read and gestured for me to sit. I could feel the quiet around us, heavy and expectant. "I keep thinking about what you said yesterday," she began, sitting across from me. "That you think I'm brave." She gave a small laugh, almost bitter. "I don't feel brave. I feel trapped, like I've been waiting years for someone to notice I'm more than what Noah Sullivan or anyone decides for me." Her voice cracked then, and before I could stop myself, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull back. "You don't have to explain yourself to me," I said quietly. "You don't owe him anything. Not your time, not your peace." She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes glistening in the soft light. Then she whispered, "And what do I owe you?" The question stopped me cold. I swallowed hard, searching her face. "Nothing. I don't want debt between us. I just don't want you to face this alone." Something shifted. Then she leaned closer, her hand tightening on mine. The space between us felt charged, fragile, like one wrong word could break it. I could hear the rain starting against the window, soft at first, then heavier, filling the silence we couldn't. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thomas Reed, you've been the first real kindness in my life in a long time. I didn't realize how much I needed that." Before I could answer, she brushed her fingers lightly against my cheek. It wasn't bold. It wasn't desperate. It was tender, almost questioning. My breath caught. "I don't want to be reckless," she said, "but I don't want to be afraid anymore either." I covered her hand with mine, holding it there against my skin. Words felt unnecessary. The truth was already hanging between us. We sat like that, close but not crossing the line, while the storm outside grew louder. Every flash of lightning lit the room in brief white light. Every rumble of thunder pressed us closer together. It was as if the world was daring us to admit what we already knew. At some point, she leaned her head against my shoulder. I stayed perfectly still, afraid that moving might shatter the fragile peace of the moment. Her breathing slowed, steady, and warm. For the first time since I met her, she looked free of the weight she carried. When she finally whispered, "Stay a little longer," I couldn't refuse. I stayed until the storm outside quieted, until her head grew heavy and her hand slipped from mine. Then, reluctantly, I left her sleeping on the couch, a blanket tucked around her. Back in my apartment, I stood at the window, watching the last drops of rain on the glass. I felt more alive than I had in years, and yet terrified because I knew nothing would ever be simple again. Not with her, not with Noah Sullivan, not with the whispers already swirling in the halls. But simple didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that, for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I woke the next morning to pounding on my door. It wasn't the polite kind. It was sharp, insistent, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even move. When I opened it, Noah Sullivan stood there, jaw tight, eyes blazing. "We need to talk," he snapped. I stepped into the hall before he could push his way in. "About what?" "Don't play dumb about Sarah Bennett." His voice was low, dangerous. "You think you can just slide into her life? Take what you want. Like her history doesn't matter. Like I don't matter. She's not yours." I said evenly, though my pulse hammered in my throat. "She decides who she lets in. Not you." His lips curled. "You've known her for what, weeks? I've been there for years. I watched her fall apart. I carried her through it. And I'll be damned if some washed-up neighbor thinks he's her savior." The word stung, but I held my ground. "Maybe you carried her, but you also caged her. She doesn't owe you for that." For a moment I thought he'd swing. His fists clenched, his chest heaved. But then he leaned in close enough for me to smell the bitterness on his breath. "This ends tonight. Walk away or you'll regret it." He stormed off, leaving the hallway heavy with his threat. That evening I went to Sarah Bennett. She opened the door before I knocked, like she'd been waiting. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. "He came here too," she whispered. "He told me if I keep seeing you, he'll ruin you. He'll ruin both of us." I closed the door behind me and took her hands. "Let him try. I'm not leaving." Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't sad. They were full of relief, of something unspoken finally taking root. She leaned against me and I held her, feeling the storm we'd both been avoiding crash around us. For hours we talked about fear, about the loneliness that had shaped us, about the simple truth that we had stumbled into each other's lives at exactly the moment we both needed someone to believe in. She told me how trapped she'd felt under Noah Sullivan's shadow, how she'd almost convinced herself love wasn't meant for her anymore. I told her about the nights I sat alone, pretending I was fine when all I wanted was for someone to knock on my door and ask if I was okay. By the time the night settled deep, it felt like the world outside had disappeared. There was just us, two people who had finally decided not to run. But life doesn't wait for tidy endings. As I left her apartment, the hallway lights flickered, and I noticed Noah Sullivan's car still parked outside. He was watching, engine off, cigarette glowing in the dark. Our eyes met through the glass and his message was clear. This wasn't over. Back in my apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed, replaying everything. Her whispered words the first night, the tea, the storm, the way she'd looked at me tonight when I said I wasn't leaving. For the first time in years, I felt certain about something. Whatever came next, gossip or threats, whispers or fights, I wouldn't back down. I lay down, exhausted but alive. And just before sleep took me, I realized I was waiting for morning. Not with dread but with hope. Because tomorrow meant one thing, another chance to see her, to choose her, no matter what stood in the way. And that was enough. Now if your temperature rises at night, call me. But it's better to come to me. And how can you help me at midnight? Maybe it's better to go to the hospital right away. You should subscribe to this channel, press the bell, and write a comment. After all, it is on this channel that you will find interesting life stories that will touch your heart. Enjoy watching.